Hi everybody, this is Crypto Rich, working with you to get rich with crypto, filling our pockets with crypto profits. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about a decentralized, a hybrid exchange, an ERC20 exchange, which claims to be the most user-friendly decentralized exchange for Ethereum-based tokens. This is DDEX, and I have with me the CEO of DDEX, and no doubt he claims to be the most user-friendly CEO of any decentralized exchange. We shall find out. And now, before I introduce him, I want to remind you this is not financial advice. Do your own due diligence. Don't invest any more than you can afford to lose. And in this video and the other videos that I cover on my channel, all I'm doing is sharing my opinion and sharing with you what I'm discovering as I travel along on the blockchain. Okay, good morning, Tian Li.
Good morning, Rich. Yeah, thanks for that intro, and very happy to be here.
Yes, very good, very good. Well, you started off friendly already. That's a great start. And you're in Beijing, I'm in the UK, and what we're going to talk about really is DDEX and what is DDEX. So, Tian, before we start about DDEX, tell me a little bit about yourself, your relevant background. Who are you? Why are you?
Sure. So I guess I would describe myself as a serial entrepreneur. So I was in the Valley for 5 years. I graduated and worked for Microsoft for 1.5 years as an engineer. I studied computer science, right. And then I did 2 other startups after that. I sold my last startup in 2016, and I was taking a break because I was getting kind of sick of normal internet and mobile internet space. And I wasn't sure what to do. Yeah. In 2017, I was working at a venture capital fund as an entrepreneur in residence, which actually means that they pay you a little bit to sort of research your potential next ideas. So I had lots of free time to look around and see what's coming up, right? And that's when blockchain kind of captured my eye. And I started just looking into Ethereum and Bitcoin, all these things. And this is almost exactly a year ago, March of 2017. Mm-hmm. So I spent probably half a year just to learn the space, and I maintained a blog in Chinese, and then I was looking at a lot of projects, reading lots and lots of white papers. I probably read about 300 of them.
300
before.
Wow.
Really getting interested in this decentralized exchange protocol.
Yeah.
And from there on, when we started, it wasn't really a startup idea. It was just after we read a bunch of white papers. I remember the 0x being the first one, and then there was Kyber and AirSwap, and a bunch of these other decentralized exchange-related stuff. We thought, hey, like the building blocks or the wheels are coming out, where maybe you can put them together and make a car. So late November, that was like 3.5 months ago, we just tried to build one of these exchanges. And we just called it DDEX. It wasn't even like an official company or anything like that. And then we were actually really amazed at how much stuff we learned building it. The first version took about 8 weeks to really make a version that's sort of fairly usable with the bot, but it was actually a fully decentralized exchange. And then once we had that first version out, we just realized there was like so much more to go in this space. So we decided to sort of like formalize it and make it into an official product. We launched it, and it was kind of interesting. So so that's how we came to be.
Okay, all right, and just tell me a little bit, because you said a lot there. I want to go back to a few things. So one is about the startups. Are they still going? Are they and you're now in China, but you would have been in the US when you were working. Are they American startups, Chinese startups? What do they do?
Yeah, so I worked for an American startup called Palantir. They were sort of this big data company, and now they're sort of government focused, but when I was there, I was working on the financial big data group. Right. So basically, we were making data analytical tools for hedge funds, banks, like big real estate, escrow funds and stuff like that. So that's how I got my background in finance as an engineer.
Yep.
And then the 2 startups I did were in Asia. We were based in China, but we were covering all Asian countries. So one of them was a mobile startup called ClassBox, and it was sort of a mobile app for college students. A little bit like a student hub, calendaring, textbooks, you can imagine. And that we got really lucky timing in with sort of the rise of Android and iOS in China.
Yep.
And so we got a huge wave of free users. At the peak, I think we had about 20 million monthly active users.
Yeah.
About 1/3 of all college students in China were using our app at one point. And then this also includes Japan, Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong. So that's how we got really familiar with the Asian market. And that actually came to be pretty helpful for doing a blockchain product because it's so global. And as you guys may know, a lot of the trading volumes come out of these Asian countries.
Yes.
So we already had sort of understanding of the basic markets around here. So we decided to sort of launch DDEX mostly with an Asian focus as well, but we also support English and English-based users.
Okay. So is there a Chinese language version of DDEX if I wanted to shift it to Chinese, or is it all in English?
There is. Once you go into the trading page, there's like a drop down with like a language feed. So Chinese and English are the two versions we support.
Okay, where would I find that?
So you have to go into the start trading. We haven't localized the main page yet.
Right. Okay. All right. No problem. But there is a drop down for Chinese traders, so it's in Chinese and English. Okay. And so you launched this, and it was decentralized, but I understand now it's not decentralized. You explained to me beforehand it's a hybrid. Could you explain the structure of that?
Sure. So basically, any on-chain transaction is both expensive and slow, as any Ethereum users would know.
Yes.
So there's basically three actions to an exchange, right? You set an order, you can cancel an order, or if the two orders match, the assets actually settle, which means they like swap, right? So trading token A for token B. So those are sort of the essential core actions on an exchange. So the idea was that for a hybrid exchange, the asset swapping, it has to be done on-chain because that actually moves the assets, right? And that's how you get non-custodial decentralized trading. But we figure for the other actions, such as setting an order and canceling an order, they can both be done off-chain, right? So if you've used other decentralized exchanges, sometimes you will realize that, say, canceling an order, actually, you need to wait a long time because you have to cancel with a transaction on the blockchain.
Yeah.
But for our system, because it's hybrid, canceling and creation of orders is actually done in the database. And so pretty much what we hope is like a best of both worlds experience where you're kind of getting the fast action sequences, basically multiple orders that you can make per second, but at the end of the day, you don't have to deposit. You don't have to give custodianship of your assets to anyone, right? So, I mean, there's a few different ways to do hybrid exchanges, and people kind of like are on the spectrum, right? And we chose what we believe is the right mix, the sweet spot.
Okay.
But time will tell.
Okay. All right. And then how secure is it? Because I know of other exchanges. I know, ETHERDELTA was hacked, I think, just around about the time of their ICO. I know that not FORKDELTA. I don't know about FORKDELTA being hacked. I'm sure attempts have been made. I know that IDEX has come under DDoS attacks. How can I be assured that this exchange is not going to disappear or my funds aren't going to get stolen?
Yeah, so there's actually two parts to this question. So one is that it is actually possible. So the idea with these decentralized exchanges is that instead of giving your assets to a company, you give it to a smart contract. So for the ETHERDELTA, you will still deposit, but you just don't deposit to somebody's wallet. You deposit to a smart contract, which is supposedly open source and safe from bugs. But for us, we actually use a different model. We're actually based on the 0x protocol, which I will explain in a minute. But essentially, we don't actually ask you to deposit. There is, for ERC20 token, so a lot of people say ERC20 token, but if you actually look at the ERC20 interface, there's some like 4 or 5 very basic functions, right? You have the name of the token, you have total supply, you can transfer, but there's also one function that I think is like a very cool feature. It's called approve, which means that if you own a token, you can actually approve a third party, a smart contract, to basically move your tokens in the right conditions. So our exchange is based on the premise of this approval feature of all ERC20 tokens. So if a user approves this token and the conditions match when like an order should be executed, then we basically can use the approval function to directly call transfer and do like a wallet to wallet transfer. So in this case, like you don't ever actually deposit your ERC20 token into anything, even a smart contract, right? So that is sort of like the last place. So like if there was a bug in the smart contract with ETHERDELTA, your funds could still get locked up, right? Or someone maybe get, pseudo privileges and you can move the fund. But I think approval is like one step above that in security. And so I think approval is also like really cool because like you don't actually have to lock up your funds, right? Because when you use these some of the other decentralized exchanges, you have to give funds to the exchange.
Yeah.
But if you use an approval-based exchange such as DDEX, your tokens are always in your wallet up to the moment the trade occurs. So they're never sitting idle.
That's amazing.
And
that's amazing. So let me get this. So say with FORKDELTA, which I've never used by the way, or ETHERDELTA, which I've stopped using by the way, or IDEX, which I do very occasionally use. I mean, I'm not really buying much in the way of ERC20 lately. What I got to do is I got to deposit the funds, send the funds from my wallet to the smart contract of those exchanges, and the smart contract is secure as long as I don't end up in a phishing site, which looks like one of those sites but isn't, but it's a scam site. And then the transaction happens through the smart contract with their smart contract. But what you're saying is I can keep the ERC20, say, in my Exodus wallet, and there's an approval mechanism which allows the transaction to go ahead. So my wallet is never actually connected to the exchange. And so it's never ever open in any way whatsoever. Because no one can get into my wallet without the private key currently, and it stays that way. Did I get that right?
Yes, and the tokens doesn't move from your wallet, right? So like, let's say you wanted to trade a token, like say, EOS or something. The EOS token never leaves your wallet until the trade.
Okay.
So you will always, let's say you have 20 EOS, right? You just approve, you still have 20 EOS, and then someone matches your order, and then only after that order is executed do you have less than 20 EOS. If you were to want to say sell that token.
Okay, all right, very good. Tian, do you want to just can you angle your camera a little bit because I'm missing the top of your head. That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Okay. Thank you. All right. Let me see. And then I suppose it's the same. It's the same process whether I'm buying and selling and exchanging ETH. It would just the exchange will happen, and then the money will come. Now you said about the 0x protocol. Now, I have not looked into 0x, so could you please say how that works and how that's relevant to DDEX?
Sure. So I think one choice was to whether write our own. In the end, right, a contract would do the trade, right? So like user A, trading token A, user B trading token B. At some point, A and B, the tokens they have to swap.
Yeah.
Right. And so one question is whether to just write the smart contract yourself or use an existing contract that does the heavy lifting, right? And so one thing is that like this contract could actually, something could go wrong with it, right? And so we figured that if everyone was implementing their own, the possibility that something bad happens is like higher, right? So by using the 0x contracts to do the very low level atomic swapping, basically we offload the securitization of that action to a well understood and well used contract, right? So I think with these decentralized exchanges, as you know, like with the DAO or something, some bad things could still happen, right? Because like programmers write bugs, and like as good as you claim to be, there has to be like a sense of like humility. Also, you want to do the least amount possible, right? Basically, do not reinvent the wheel.
No,
so we figured in this case, what 0x has already done, and they've already paid money for multiple, audits and code reviews. So any sort of like open source, well-reviewed product, we would use, right? And basically, product is like built in layers. So the 0x protocol describes the basic order of a decentralized exchange, like a buy order or a sell order.
Right.
So basically, by using their protocol, we don't reinvent the wheel in that part. Instead, we can just focus on making a user-friendly exchange.
Okay, very good. Now, do I need to own any 0x tokens in order to use the platform?
No, you do not. So basically, that's one of our conditions, that we do not add anything that would increase the friction of onboarding a new user, right? So when you're talking about user-friendly, we're not talking about design or UI, although those are important too. It's just that I think the least number of steps for people to understand what they're doing and onboard. Because as you know, right, managing your private key, especially for like a non-hardcore blockchain user, is already like a big deal, right? So basically, and there's all these steps you have to go through to kind of like get a hold of your own assets and wallets. So we want there to be the least number of like frictional points leading up to the product. And so, like when we first started, our sort of design goal was like summed up in a single sentence, which is, you get the safety of ETHERDELTA mixed with the usability of GDEX, which is the exchange made by Coinbase, which I think is like a pretty usable exchange.
Right.
And that was the goal, right? I'm not claiming that we're there, because building a GDEX out of decentralized technology is hard, right? And we don't aim to get there in 10 weeks. We aim to get there over the course of maybe a year of iteration. So, but that is sort of the North Star for sort of where our product would go.
Okay, very good. And what about transaction fees then, and gas fees, and how do you make money?
Well, so there's two parts to the fee, right? So the gas fee is what you would pay to the Ethereum network to handle the transaction. There's no way getting around that. That's like the basic building block. But so there's two ways to think about it, right? If you were just to make a bunch of like intermediate speculative trading, this gas fee is an additional cost. But let's say like if your goal was to just buy a token and have it like in your own wallet to use, then this fee is almost always cheaper than using a centralized exchange. Because in the centralized exchange, after you buy the token, you have to withdraw the token. And the withdrawal fee is always equal to or greater than the gas cost. Right? So I think a really cool thing that about using these decentralized exchanges is that after you complete the transaction, the token is in your wallet and there's no more additional steps. So it depends on what you compare it to, right? So basically, we think of it as the trading and then getting the withdrawal. That's like combined into a single action, and you actually save gas costs. But yeah, so that's always just an unavoidable part of having real-time settlement, right? So basically, every time you execute, the wallet actually arrives at your wallet, and you will have to pay the network for that to happen.
Okay, that's good, because I know with ETHERDELTA and with IDEX, and I imagine also with FORKDELTA, which is just a different, it's the same smart contract as ETHERDELTA. So I pay gas. So I'm paying gas when I'm depositing tokens from my wallet onto this smart contract, and then I'm paying gas when I do the actual trade to buy or sell, and then I'm paying gas when I bring those tokens back into my own wallet. And what you're saying is that because of the way this is set up, the gas fee is only when I approve the transaction, and it goes wallet to wallet.
Yes. So basically, there's two types, right? There's a transaction and there's a signature. So the transaction is something that executes on chain, and that costs gas. And for 0x based relay or decentralized exchange such as DDEX, you pay for the approval and then you pay for the trade, right? And then, because there's no deposit action, you don't pay for the deposit. But placing an order and canceling an order, you basically sign an offline transaction, you submit that through our API, and that is free. So the creating orders and taking orders doesn't cost money. So for something like ETHERDELTA, when you create a taker order, that actually costs gas.
Right. Okay.
As well.
Okay. Now, what about DDEX platform? I mean, where do you make your money? Because I know ETHERDELTA earns money, and I know IDEX earns money. The people, the team, the organization behind it.
Yeah, so right now we're in beta and we're just experimenting with a 0.1% transaction fee. We just picked something lower than market average. I think the average is usually like 0.3 or 0.2. Right. We just started somewhere, and we may bring it down to free in the future. We haven't really decided, but I think with these basically entry-level products, there's many ways to make money, I think, but just making something that user wants is probably our core focus. And we're well funded by basically institutional investors. So we're not really focused on making money in the short term. But we just threw a fee in there just because like we didn't want people to come just because it's free, right? So we just threw something like the market rate, and to see if people will use our product because it's better, right? It's a way to test and iterate.
Okay, all right. And then you didn't do an ICO. It's been privately funded, like you said. I mean, why didn't you do an ICO? Is there a token involved?
So DDEX doesn't have a token. So that's like a really interesting question because so we thought about it, and DDEX will never have a token. So because I think a token that is tied to a single exchange is very centralized, right? So basically, if you look at something like Binance or ETHERDELTA being the actually, I probably shouldn't talk, but so so if you look at the ETHERDELTA token, but just the factual part of it is that
Tian,
okay,
Tian, excuse me for interrupting. And viewers, if you're watching, there's a little time lag when I ask a question between here in the UK and Beijing, so which it probably looks much ruder when you watch it than it was. And I did warn Tian beforehand that I may interrupt him because we want this to be a natural conversation. In natural conversations, people interrupt each other. They don't want to go back. Hey, wait a minute, what about this? So what was I going to say? So ETHERDELTA does have its own token, the EDT, after the ICO. It didn't before. IDEX does have its own tokens, the Aurora token, and then there's another token, I forget the name, they changed the name of it recently, which gives you, both those tokens give you certain benefits, a reduction in fees. FORKDELTA doesn't have a token. So I just wanted to say that now. Please carry on. So you don't have a token. Why don't you have a token? And I'm actually glad you don't have a token.
Well, so I think it's actually exchange is one of those product forms that could have a token, right? Basically, the token could be some sort of fee discount, and that is basically essentially tied to the revenue or profit of this exchange, right? So the problem with such a token format is that we thought it would just be too centralized. So it's like even though the exchange itself is decentralized, and token being a ERC20 is technically decentralized, what that token would represent is actually just a profit share of the exchange, right? And so let's say the underlying exchange doesn't do well, right? Then the price of the token will go into zero. If the exchange takes off like really big, and then the price of that token takes off. So it is, we felt, too security-like to have a token tied to the performance of a single exchange. So part of our team is also involved in another project that does have a token, but that one is it's called the Hydro Protocol. But I mean, it's a little bit different in that we wanted a token to solve the liquidity problem. Because these decentralized exchanges, I think one of the biggest pain points is that their liquidity is like nowhere near as good as the centralized exchanges. In addition to the product and the speed, without liquidity being like a core problem. And that one, we also did not do an ICO. It was also privately funded. But the idea is that instead of tying a token that is sort of like a fee, award, or revenue share, we will only tie it to an incentive problem that is a network effect based problem.
Okay.
So we did think it through like a lot, and so the token, I think something like token economics is like very interesting and important to us. And getting the incentive aligned right, and like really having a decentralized incentive system. I think that is like an opportunity to really insert an interesting token in there. And then, like, I'm pretty confident saying that DDEX will probably never have a token of its own.
Right. Okay. I mean, there is a certain, I suppose, incentive. I hold Binance tokens. I've never used Binance, by the way, but I hold some tokens and they've gone up in value. I hold some Aurora tokens, and hopefully I bought them fairly recently. They'll go up in value, hopefully, when the bear market turns. For EDT holders, the ETHERDELTA token, they bought those tokens because they want a return. I mean, why not have some sort of incentive for users of DDEX?
So we do. So that's how we partnership with the Hydro Protocol, in that like we want to be sort of in this like family of decentralized exchanges that will share a single common token. So in that way, so I actually think that these decentralized relayers is actually very easy to go from one or the other, and that no single relayer will probably cover the entire market. So although like as a business founder, you think about barriers and monopolies. in this case, I actually think decentralized exchanges have like much less barriers and lower friction for users switching between them, which is actually a really good thing for the ecosystem and the user base. So I think having a single, so like the average user use more than one exchange. I think that is like a fact of life. Just as the average citizen will use more than one airline, right? Yeah. So you will never, even having like a reward program doesn't lock you into a single airline just because no one single airline can cover all the routes.
Right.
And so this is why you have these like frequent flyer programs that are in alliances, right? And so like we also think of these things that it would be interesting to have an incentive token that is removed from a single exchange, but could help bootstrap liquidity for a family of exchanges in the future. So the token is, we do have a token in play called the Hydro token, but it's not strongly tied to the performance of the single exchange. And just as a disclaimer, I own Binance tokens, BNB, myself. And it's a great investment, but because it is a great investment because they did great, right? They're a kick-ass operating company that really grabbed a huge amount of market share in a very short of time, right? Yeah. So, but buying that token, it felt like buying stock into Binance, if you know what I mean. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a sort of a equity type of token. It just wasn't interesting to us to introduce another equity token for our business.
Okay, very good, very good. And then if I wanted to, so let me see before I say this. So I want to ask you some difficult questions. Okay, so you're here, you seem pleasant, right? You're doing all the right things. How do I know? How can I find out more about you? How can I find out more about the team? Because there's no link to any sort of white paper. That you really are as who you say you are. You know, is there any information on the team? Any LinkedIn profiles we can check out? Anything about that?
Yeah, so we're pretty active on Telegram, Reddit, and Medium.
Yeah.
And it's still early. I think one thing to notice is that I think we're like we're actually a little bit later than some of the other projects. We've been trying to run pretty fast. I think like when we started thinking about this problem in late November, there were already, like ETHERDELTA was like well on its way, and like IDEX was already online. So we were sort of building on top of like the some of the earlier entrants into the market, and so it just took a while for us to really actually. So we're on the market for a relatively short amount of time, but we try to make ourselves available, and we love talking to the users. Right? There's our Telegram group have a couple hundred of users, and then we have a WeChat group for Asia that has about 500 users, and some of them are great. Right? These are people are really excited about the technology in general, like lots of advice and lots of feedback. Right? And I think like it is like paramount for us to get to talk to real users and really like learn how to iterate our product. Like even our office is that we have like weekly basically visiting sessions. Right? We try to like pick 3 or 5 users to come to our office like every week. We'll sit them in front of a computer, like show them some of our new features upcoming, and they've been like extremely helpful in giving positive and negative feedback. And we have an API program, and we're working through about like 10 to 20 market makers. Yep. Who are also giving us advice on the APIs. And I think we do have to do even a better job because of communication, right?
Sure.
And so I think it's one thing about like putting a picture of a face in for a like LinkedIn account or something like that. Like within a small circle, we have a pretty good reputation. We're also backed by pretty well accredited investors. So we're invested by Initialize, which is founded by Alexis, the founder of Reddit, and Gary Tang. He was the founder of, he's a partner of Y Combinator before. In the Silicon Valley scene, we're pretty well, recognized at least. And then in Asia, our team, this is our 3rd go around, and we had 2 exits before. So within the community, I guess like I wouldn't say we're famous, but we are like decently known.
Sure.
But in the crypto community, I think it's just that. We have to do like a really good job of communicating our intent and basically where we're going with this, and we're learning as we go.
Okay.
And we hope to do a better job. Being on your show, right? That is just trying to put a face to the name, to the website,
Sure.
and let people know that we're like real people
Yes,
this product.
Yes, thank you, Tian. And may I suggest, given that you're out for people to know more about the platform, I think it adds to your credibility if you add links to the investors that are behind this, some information about the team, not necessarily a white paper, but just some sort of foundational document, because it's so risky, this space. It's so risky, and people got to be careful. One thing that I'm going to do is we're going to do a live transaction where I'm going to send some ETH from my Exodus wallet, and you're going to talk me through it. And what we might do a series of short videos which are just about how to use this platform. But I would recommend to anybody and everybody who decides to use this platform or not, test it first. Use a tiny amount of ETH, buy yourself one token or something, test it, make sure it's safe, and also make sure, this is the biggest risk of all, and this is the same whether it's IDEX or ETHERDELTA or FORKDELTA, check the URL, that you're going to the right URL. It should always have this S, and don't go to somewhere which is DDEX or some .io or DDEX.com. Those sorts of scams will arise as this platform gets bigger and bigger. So make sure you go to the right website and do a test first. Okay, thank you for letting me say that, Tian. I wanted to ask you about the listing of tokens. So I do know, and I don't think a lot of people know this, because on many Telegram groups, people are saying, when exchange, when exchange, how come this is not an exchange yet? And I don't think people realize how much it costs to list a token. I know of CEOs have told me that, they got small tokens, they've just had their ICO, and the major European exchanges are asking something like $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. $500,000 worth. And then they're also making the money off all the fees. So if you've got a small ICO that maybe raised, I don't know, $5 to $10 million in an ICO, and then you've got to pay $500,000, it's ridiculous. So what do you want to say? Anything you want to say about that and your listing process?
I think the power to list tokens is like one of the biggest things. I think it is even more important than like who's making money, right?
Yeah.
Or the you're totally right? So when there's a few things that happens, I think is all bad for the ecosystem, right? The first thing is that the money, it just gets taken out of the ecosystem, right? So this is money. So some project teams, like, why would people pay $500,000? It's because they've just raised $20 million, right? But this is money who's coming from crypto investors, who the money is supposed to go to the development of the projects,
yes.
Right? So the investors would definitely get pissed off when a middleman just takes this as profits.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like an insider's game. It's like, I'm giving you liquidity, so for you to speculate, but like the projects themselves, right? They don't actually get anything from it, and so that's the first problem. And the second problem is that I think it is almost, so people are asked, like, why are these projects raising so much money, right? It's almost a critical mass problem, because if you don't get big enough, let's say if you were to do a $500,000 ICO, which would be great for some of these projects, it shouldn't cost that much money. Yeah. Right, then you can't get on any exchange, and then so no one invests in the ICO because there's like no liquidity, and so these projects they become like really, really big, right? And the third is that decentralized exchange. Part of it is supposed to be, it's not just when we say decentralized exchange, I think there's multiple meanings to it, right? And one of it is called non-custodial trading, which is like the exchange don't hold your money, but then the other part of it is the governance issue, right? It's like, who owns this exchange, or the power of this exchange. So I think this is where having a token model that governs sort of like the power to list is like very important, because in the end it should be the users that gets to choose which project gets backed and which project gets liquidity, right? And ideally, no money should be involved, or very little, right? Because it doesn't cost money, right? It's not an expense problem; it's pure profit. So that is definitely one of the problems we think about a lot. And I think, but the ETHERDELTA model, is very interesting too, because they just basically allow the listing of any token, right?
Not
and I think
anymore.
it's like completely liberal listing.
Tian,
it's also the other extreme.
Sorry, Tian, not anymore.
Yes, go ahead.
After the ICO, under the new ownership, I think right now they've suspended. They've had all sorts of problems since the ICO, by the way. They suspended listing of any new tokens, and then what they said in their white paper is that people are going to have to buy. Any ICO is going to have to buy the EDT token and escrow some of that in order to get listed. So they've introduced a fee. Now the problem that with ETHERDELTA under Zach's ownership, there was no fee. I could go and write the smart contract in for any cryptocurrency, ERC20 token, and then it was available. Now the problem with that, as I found out from talking to Alex Wynn, who's the CEO of IDEX, is I could also invent a copy token that looks like Populous or looks like a MiseGo, create a smart contract, list it, and hey, I'm getting free ETH, and people are getting some dud token that is a mimic of the real token. And what IDEX do is I think they have free listing, but they screen the coins, the tokens. So you can list them and they check them and then they go live. So what's the process?
Yeah, I think that's a great model. That's exactly our model as well. It's totally free to list, but we do curate. It's actually almost the same reason. Also, I think there's so many of these tokens out there, like tens of thousands.
Yes.
That I think some curation is a feature, right? And it's also our way we almost think of it as like running an app store. Back in the last, in the mobile apps era, right? Like thinking about like Apple running their app store and the Android Play Store, right? Is that anyone can make an app, and some of these apps are like scams or they're viruses, right? And so completely liberal access to the apps might be dangerous. I think there might be a niche for that as well, right? But I'm thinking, there might be a few exchanges that would curate and then maybe focus on different themes, right? And so, like for example, some of the tokens we focus on are like more well known in Asia, and actually it's not just for the Asian traders, but there are crypto traders in Europe and the Western world that actually are interested in Asian-based tokens, and we're like one of the only exchanges to offer them. And so, I think what I'm saying is that the curation is a feature, right? As long as like it's free and it's accessible, and it doesn't screen out the sort of the good projects. And so, I think the token listing will always be free. And so, there might be a few instances. There's an interesting model that we're like experimenting with. It's like maybe asking the project for a little bit of token just to increase friction, but instead of pocketing the token, maybe we airdrop it to users as a way to help them, attract them to come and bootstrap liquidity, right? So that should be like a win-win-win for all parties involved as well.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you. And then you're a hybrid decentralized exchange. Where are your servers? And how can you protect yourself and the users from some sort of regulatory crackdown? The government says, hey, listen, we don't want this, and we're going to shut it down.
Sure. So first, let me talk about the worst case scenario. It's like what happens when, say, like if like DDEX server just all goes down. So we have multiple servers across the world, and this is not one for redundancy and two just for better usability. So we have servers in Singapore, Tokyo. So we're on AWS. So any of the Amazon Web Services server location center that they cover, we run.
Right.
And so the worst thing that could possibly happen is that we would lose your limit orders, and that would be it, right? Because we have no funds, not even the smart contracts, right? So if ETHERDELTA went down and you had some coins in there, you could still get it out, but you will have to like get a programmer to write a script or something, or you can figure out a way to send the exact same transaction, or wait for FORKDELTA, right? But if DDEX went down, there would be nothing to recover because all your assets are always in your wallet. So with that said, I think like uptime is extremely important. And so far, like, I don't think our server has ever been down. And so we do invest a lot in redundancy. And I think that's our team has built, applications with more than 10 million concurrent daily active users. So I think that experience comes in handy, and like I'm just understanding how to build sort of redundant servers.
Right. Okay. All right. That's a really good point, because of course you don't have the funds. So there is no risk. And then if I place an order like to buy 100 MiseGo, and then the website for whatever reason shuts down. Well, I've not lost anything other than that instruction or that request. Hey, I'm looking for 100 of me, say go for this much ETH. Very good. Okay, and the gas fees, are they auto-calculated like with IDEX, or do I got to make the adjustment myself? Tian, can you hear me? Tian, can you hear me? Wave to me. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. The last part cut out a little bit.
Right. Okay,
let me repeating that last
sure,
part.
not at all. If I can remember it. Let me do it. So, how are the gas fees calculated? Because in ETHERDELTA, I had to adjust them myself, or the transaction took forever. In IDEX, they're automatically calculated. And how are you going to address scalability issues?
Yes, I mean, I think the various models, right? They all have their advantages and disadvantages, right? Because so the decentralization is like a degree, right? So basically, like we think of it as just like tools to solve like different problems, and so I think. And also, there's different types of traders, right? So you have like the quant traders who are, making like microsecond transactions. There's sort of the day traders who make like multiple transactions, and there's people who just buy a token and hold on to them for a long time.
Yep.
So I think, one of our use cases that we think about a lot is that what happens when these tokens theoretically become utility tokens. In that, like today, people mostly buy tokens to speculate, but like let's say that you actually have to buy a token to use it.
Yes.
So there's a project that I'm pretty familiar with. It's called Decentraland, and they have they're sort of like a second life on the blockchain type of project, right? And so like they're coming with these lands that you can buy. So they have like lands, and they also have a token which you use to buy lands. And then the question is like, oh, how do you buy the token so you can buy the land? And right now the answer is that you have to go to a centralized exchange, register an account. And then buy the tokens, withdraw, and get in your wallet, and then you can buy the land. So, like from that user flow, I think the centralized exchanges are like far too clumsy, and this is why I think services like Shapeshift exist, right? Shapeshift is centralized, but then it skips all that and sort of like does everything for you, like you said, in sort of a easy, like one-click solution,
yep.
Right? I think decentralized is technology like ideal for that use case as well, right? Because and so I think in the future, right, we are thinking of like coming up with like simpler product forms to solve that sort of issue, right? But there's no replacing the limit matching engine. So like an exchange is somewhere that you just get tokens. I think there are two fundamentally different product types, and they are like very important, right? Because in the end, you probably need some sort of limit order engine for price discovery. If your token is only traded in a single place, somebody has to discover the price of it. Otherwise, market makers can't even set a price to say like how much it's worth, right? And as of right now, like the only technology we have to discover prices is it's an exchange. So,
okay.
I think it'll be cool to support like both price forms.
Okay, and then what about the gas fees? How are they worked out on the DDEX platform? Can I adjust them? Are they automatically worked out?
Yeah, so we have a recommendation. We usually have put a little bit higher than what the gas oracles, right? So basically, you look at the average transaction. There are these sites like Youth Gas Station, which is awesome, and they have APIs that tell you what the average price of the gas is and like how much time you will expect. So we try to, we have an algorithm too for optimizing. We try to pay the lowest amount of gas, such that you still get your transactions through in a reasonable amount of time. And then, but of course, we only fill that number into your MetaMask or whatever wallet you have, and you're free to change that.
Right.
So we noticed some advanced users, they would like to save money, they will put in like a much lower gas price, but then they'll end up waiting half an hour, which they're probably okay with, which is okay because the price is locked in. So it's not like you're missing the ability to trade. It's just that it takes a little bit longer to get the money moved to your wallet, but the price is locked in. So I think some people don't care about that, and there are people who don't care about gas, and they just put in like a very high gas price.
Yes.
So, but what's really interesting is that gas price is like a flat fee, right? So it is relatively very expensive if you make like a very tiny order. But if you're making a large order, it still costs. That's why like the criticism of of any crypto in general is like if I buy coffee with it, I'm paying this like huge percentage cost. But then if you buy a house with it, you pay the exact same flat rate, which is awesome.
Yes.
So as of now, I think decentralized exchanges, they're better optimized for relatively low frequency, like high, sort of like average transaction cost traders, right? And I think we're all betting that the base network like Ethereum, the scalability is going to be solved in one way or the other, right?
Okay.
And
yes, well, let's hope so, right? Vitalik and his team bringing out Plasma, because we're going to have EOS going live.
Yes.
We got ETHFinex being developed. Sorry, EOS Finex. Did I say that right?
Also, one of the things is that sorry, I'm not sure if I'm cutting you off, but the connection went bad for a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm saying like one like really interesting like for us working on this is that it's at the crossroad of like many near upcoming technology. In that like if the state channel stuff, right, that comes out, like Lightning framework and the written and all of this Plasma, right, I think decentralized exchange would be one of the earliest adopters and benefiters, right? And if like a decentralized stablecoin comes out and proves that it can be stable, that's like one of the first technologies that we can adopt. If cross-chain technology comes out, I think that would be also very helpful. So like if you're looking at like the most exciting projects in the next 2 years in the blockchain space, I think they all like sort of intersect because exchange is like a fundamental problem. Right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to work on the relay in this perspective.
Yes, very good. And just on what you said, so I know Minex Coin are working on addressing the volatility problem, the price volatility, and their atomic swaps are in testnet. Now they're on the blockchain protocol. The other one that I haven't mentioned yet, but I've got up here, is Komodo platform, and I'm going to be doing videos about them on my channel because they've got their Barter DEX in beta, and they can now do blockchain protocol swaps to ERC20 tokens. So KMD, their token, into Populous, for example. So there's a lot coming out. I think there's plenty of room. It's like there's many different airlines, or in many cities you'll have many different bus companies or many different taxi firms. So there's plenty of room. The market and the potential is so large. What's something else I was going to ask you? What was it? I've lost my train of thought. What was I going to ask you? I can't remember. Let me check my notes. All right. So yes, the number of daily users. So how many users do you have right now? And also, you said that earlier this is a public beta. So there's two questions. Number of users, this is a public beta, and when are you going to go fully live?
Yeah, when you mentioned sort of airlines and stuff like that, right? I think it's a really great analogy because I think it would be nice if like people had choices, right?
Yeah.
So we don't think of exchange. So right now, shaping up at the reason why exchange can get away with, say, charging $500,000, listing fee is also because they're forming these mini monopolies where they control almost all the liquidity, right? And it's not just having more exchanges doesn't help because there's a network effect. Because once you have enough liquidity, then the long tail exchanges are just not as relevant, right? And it's just that I think even though as we're working on this exchange, we actually don't want to make the exchange a monopoly. We're being like made barrier to entry, right? So if DDEX owns all of the ERC20 trading transaction volume on the network, I don't think it would actually be a good thing for the network, just to be honest. And so
Sure.
I think that the average user should have options, right? And so I think there's a study somewhere that says the average trader uses 4 exchanges. And I think it's an interesting number because it's similar to the number of airline average user uses, right? And so when you talk about incentives, I think it's nice to know that the barrier to switch between decentralized exchanges is actually way lower than centralized exchanges because you don't need a new account, right? If all the asset is in your wallet moves with you. And so hopping from one DApp to another DApp should be a very low friction event. And that's a really good thing for everyone, for the ecosystem. I think as the builder of these DApps, you just have to be aware of this and understand how to build a product around this use case instead of trying to force sort of like lock in, right? So it is the same reason why like airlines cannot lock in all the users, because they can't cover like all the routes in the world, right? And so that's why they form alliances. And so like jumping from one airline to another airline, so you get sort of like a hybrid mix of, loyalty versus like accessibility. So I think that's like a really interesting model. But with that said, I think, as a business, there's like so many opportunities, right? If you can solve like one piece of the puzzle and like be really good at it, and also just take in, without reinventing the wheel, taking pieces from like the other part of the ecosystem, you can still build a really nice product that solves like a real world problem.
Okay, thank you. And tell me about the number of daily active users you have, and also you mentioned that this is a public beta. When is the platform going to go live?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. Tell me, how many daily active users do you have?
Okay, so we came online almost exactly 2 months ago. Right now we have about 4,500 trading accounts. It's interesting because this data is actually all public. If you know how to, just like an interesting note, right? If you want to figure out how many users a decentralized exchange has, it's actually just like all written on the blockchain, which is pretty cool. So like we know how many users like ETHERDELTA had like when they were 2 months old and such and such. So we compare a little bit for just for fun. But we have a couple hundred daily active, and it's not a lot, and but we're keeping it close, and it's actually enough activity for us now to like understand our problem and iterate. So we will make some sort of a marketing effort once we have like a V1, which we are hoping to roll out around somewhere around Q2, probably May.
In May,
this will have a mobile version. So like one opportunity we're really excited about is like a mobile, right? Because like these crypto exchanges are 24/7 and they're super volatile. So it sounds like something that if you had it in your hand, it will be a much nicer, right? There are many options. There are many times I recall in my own personal trading experience where it's like, oh man, like I need to make a transaction because this thing is like, it just went up 300% in the last 5 minutes, but I don't have my computer with me, so I can't. So I'm actually really surprised that there hasn't been as much of an effort made in the mobile, sector in the exchange space. So
very good. Okay, so mobile, that would be good. So version 1 in May, sometime in May. And when excuse me, when will the Android and Apple apps be available, roughly?
So the first thing we're working on is actually not our own Android and Apple apps, but integration with third-party apps, right? Because so if we were to make our own app, which we are making, right? One thing is that then you will have to deposit into our wallet. There's like no other way around it, because we will have to manage, right? We will have to be the MetaMask for you. But like another interesting kind of applications are these sort of mobile enabled Ethereum browsers, right? So I'm talking about Status and Toshi and Cypher and Trust, if you know any of these names, right? I think that's like an interesting space that I think if these browsers can become widely adapted, I think it will actually make the ecosystem much nicer for like all the app developers, right? So we're actively working with all of them to try to have like a built exchange on there, right? To also help them like bootstrap more users.
Right. Okay. And when you said earlier, you said the number of daily users that you had, but the signal cut, so I actually didn't hear the number. So could you repeat that? All right, I'll say that again.
So, yes.
The number of daily users you have now, because the signal cut when you said the number.
Oh, okay. I think it's a couple hundred. I think like 450. That's 450. Like, I don't. Yeah.
No problem. Well, hopefully it'll be more. As long, and if you decide to use this, do check it out. Use a small amount. And there's something else I wanted to ask you, which is this. So on the website, so this is the landing page, and then this is the trading page, and we're going to do some more videos where I'm actually going to use some of my own ETH to buy some ERC20 tokens. And this is a support page that we have. All right, sorry about that, everybody. We've had some technical problems. I know the sound may not be great because there's this hissing in the background that I can hear, and Tian is struggling to hear what I'm saying clearly because the sound has deteriorated at his end. I just want to very quickly ask you, Tian, about these support pages you have, which seem very, very clear and comprehensive. And how people get to them is on the main page. You click on support, and it takes you to this page, and then you can click on these links to take you to other pages. Here's an FAQ. So do you want to tell us about the support that you offer?
Sure. Yeah. So there's the Zendex powered support page, and we try to be detailed in every action. Right. There's a question about just how to make a basic order. Right. So basically, we have a FAQ for basically leading you from a completely new user to making your first trade.
Yeah.
Right? So I think after you make your first trade, then you understand the whole system. And there's some questions about fees and transaction costs and stuff like that we want to be detailed with. A lot of it has just been, the support page usually just is compiled from the questions that we get from our live support channels.
Right.
I think our most active ones on Telegram, and there we try to be available 24/7. Because it's a nice thing is because we actually have teams in 3 different time zones. We actually are able to cover all shifts pretty well.
Wow.
We notice our users are in all time zones too. So we try to be responsive. And one of the other things that we actually try to get our engineers to partake in the customer supports. Because some of the questions are actually very detailed. And so I think the people who actually wrote the code to build it are sometimes has the best mental model to help out the users. And then we compile them to the support page afterwards. But with all this said, I think support pages are like a band-aid, right? I think actually well-used product shouldn't take that much explanation, or the explanation should be built into the product itself. So our goal is actually such that you never have to visit the support page after the first version, because all the key things will be self-explanatory within the product. So this is sort of a gap, a stopgap to getting there.
Very good, very good. Okay, and I think IDEX offers live chat support. ETHERDELTA offers very little in the way of support. Certainly before the ICO, I don't know what there is now. So do you have any plans to live chat, or is that through the Telegram group?
Yeah, that's a really interesting feature. It's just that we just wanted to have the minimal viable number of features to get going, because I think there's 1 or 2 things that are by far the most important, right? Getting liquidity and having a simple usability, right? Yeah. I think once we get there, we would love to experiment with some sort of a chat feature. It's really cool.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be. I guess support will be part of it, but there will be people talking about trading. There'll be sentiments on there. It's actually it might be fun. So it is an idea that we have on our roadmap. So not the top priority ones, but maybe cool to have.
Okay. All right. And then I take it from what you said, you're going to carry on upgrading this and improving it and making it better along the way. It's never a static product because software is always improving.
Yes, I think that's the thing, right? It was just when some of the earlier exchanges came out, we're so excited, and sort of development just stagnated. And that's sort of our main motivator to sort of carry on the torch, right? It's just that our goal is to get to a point where the usability is as good and as intuitive as the best centralized exchanges, right? I think if we can show that inflection point can be hit, I think that will actually, the inflection point is when sort of the cumulative market of all decentralized exchanges has more, maybe half the market share, right? I think there's so much to do on that end. We have a pretty full pipeline for at least the entire year, of 2018. So try to ship some stuff every month and try to get it better and better as an iterative process.
That's fabulous. That is fabulous. Well, I'm looking forward to this, and I know that you and I are going to record some more videos, which are going to be basic how-to videos, how to buy, how to sell, which is pretty much it, really. All you need to do on this platform, how to use some of the other features.
Yes.
So I want to thank you for making yourself available. Is there, before we finish off, is there anything else you want to say, get a final word in, to let people know?
Yeah, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be on here. I think like it's awesome what you're doing, because there's, although like crypto is getting like more and more mainstream, I think the number of users who can actually like operate their own private key is still like very low percentage of the community, right? Probably maybe like less than 10% of the people who own crypto assets, or own assets, they have it somewhere on the third-party exchange. And so I think just for any of these projects to have a chance to land, I think the educational effort is like huge, right? In getting the number of users who can actually even be a potential D app user. So I think like showing all the facets of of this ecosystem, is like awesome. So I'm a huge fan of what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And what I'm going to have the links to all your profiles, your Bitcoin Talk and your Telegram and your Twitter underneath. You are on Twitter. I am now on Twitter. I think this is coming up to my 3rd week on Twitter. So please follow me on Twitter and follow DDEX. Join the Telegram group. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the description below. Just like gas keeps the Ethereum smart contract moving and transactions moving on the Ethereum smart contract, please consider your comments is what keeps this channel moving. So please donate your comments freely, and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you'll find out when I do other videos about DDEX. And Tian, thank you so much for this. I look forward to speaking to you again soon so we can do more videos. And between now and when I see you next and speak to you next, everybody please keep filling your pockets with crypto profits. This is Crypto Rich and Crypto Tian signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.